And honestly, the project has become much bigger than we expected when we announced it in 2019. It's been almost 4 years since then, and so it's about time we showed you what we've been working on. Oh, hang on.
On był na zeszłym Exileconie, ale on jest bardzo schudł.
Sorry, I forgot. Okay. When we announced Path of Exile 2 at Exilecon 2019, we told you guys that we were releasing it as an expansion to PoE 1 and that both campaigns would be playable in the same game client with a shared endgame. But PoE 2's scope has continued to grow and grow, and it's far more than just an expansion with a new campaign. It has entirely new monsters, skills, mechanics, classes, everything you'd expect from the next generation of action RPGs. Not to mention revamps of most of the PoE 1 League content. This thing is just freaking huge. There was a point when we realized that our plan to replace PoE 1 with PoE 2 would essentially be getting rid of a game that people love for no real reason. So we made a decision. Path of Exile 1 and 2 will be separate with their own mechanics, balance, endgames, and leagues. But it's still a shared platform. Your microtransactions are available across both games. Everything you have ever purchased or will ever purchase in the future will be usable in both games unless it's hyper-specific to the content of one of them. You can't transform into a bear in PoE 1, so a reskin of your bear form isn't going to work. But you absolutely can equip the awesome armor set that you got and use all your stash tabs. So with that in mind, we'd love to show you a live demo of some of the stuff we've been working on. PoE 2 has come a long way. Mark here is going to man the PC. Hopefully he doesn't die. It is a live gameplay demo after all.
Misiek, PoE 1 i PoE 2 będą osobnymi grami i obe będą dalej rozwijane.
To nie jest Overwatch 2. Ej, oni będą tu grać live?
Chyba tak.
O kurwa, ale co trzeba mieć pewność siebie, nie? Szczerze.
The gods caused all this, you know. After Oriath was destroyed, I traveled, searching for answers. Everywhere I went, the same divine devastation. It must end. I will end it. And no exile will stop me!
Co?
Co? Ale dymy! Jaki niedźwiedź!
O kur...
Ale mam ciary!
No ja też mam pierdolę.
Coś mi odprawy nie będzie, kurde.
Klas jest chyba tyle samo, co w PoE 1. Możliwe, że jedna lub więcej. Bruton. No to przypomina moment, jak pokazali 6 aktów w jednym trailerze. Ja pierdolę.
Ej, design mobów jaki zajebisty.
No.
Chociaż boję się, że...
Diablo 4 players.
This world will be reborn, no matter the cost.
O kurwa.
O kurwa.
Ej, dosłownie D4 wygląda przy tym jak mobilka. Wygląda jak tania gra mobilna. Dosłownie.
Ja pierdolę. Druid PoE!
Ale... Bo wcześniej pokazali tego takiego wilkołaka, on był taki okej, nie? Ale ten niedźwiedź wyglądał tak zajebiście, taki ogromny.
Your turn now.
O, Kitek.
Welcome to Path of Exile 2.
Teraz kamerka i...
We'd like to start off by showing you some of the gameplay of Act 3, one of the 6 acts in PoE 2's campaign.
Trzeci akt pokażą.
We're starting here in the jungle depths. Act 3 is set in the ruins of the Vaal civilization, which fell thousands of years ago. Jungle has taken over their former once great cities, and we'll be exploring it using one of the 6 new character classes called the Monk. In PoE 1, we had one character class for each of the combinations of strength, dexterity, and intelligence. When looking at the design of PoE 2, though, we realized that many of the new skills that we were trying to design just didn't really fit thematically with the existing classes that we have. Being a spellcaster with a bear form makes sense for Strength Int, but it just doesn't really sound like something a Templar would do. We realized that since we had new mechanics for every attribute combination, it actually made sense to design a new character class to explore the new themes. In PoE 2, every attribute combination has 2 classes associated with it.
Czyli 6
Strength
nowych
Int has
klas.
the Templar or the Druid. On Dexterity, you have the Ranger or the more spear-focused Huntress. And on Dex Int, you have the Shadow and the Monk, which Mark is playing here. Each class has its own 3 ascendancies that let you further specialize the class in a way that only that class has access to, but they both start at the same location on the passive tree. The quest rewards you are offered on the 2 variants are tailored to the class, but of course, this is PoE. You can still mix and match anything to your heart's content.
Monkę.
Looks like we've come across the boss for this area. In PoE 2, every area of the campaign contains a boss of at least this difficulty. That's over 100 bosses to fight as you make your way through the campaign, and they all have unique mechanics.
Widzicie to, jak dodżuje ataki? Jak w Soulsach pierdolonych.
Dark Souls.
Jakieś gigatamki te boki.
As you've been watching from Mark fighting here, you probably noticed that melee combat in PoE 2 is a
Dzięki
very
Baronowski.
different feel than before. We've done a lot of things to add mobility to combat. Practically every melee skill in PoE 2 has some kind of movement built into it. But the Monk in particular
Gold
is a
może
melee
znaczyć
fighter
to,
who specializes in
że
mobility over
może
brute
flaszki i
strength.
tak dalej nie będą teraz za orby, tylko za golda. Być może.
Balazdur.
So, as Mark has been playing, you might have noticed these blue markers over enemies. Mark has a skill equipped called Killing Palm. Whenever an enemy has a blue indicator over it, it means that the monster has low enough life to cull with Killing Palm. Successfully executing the cull will give you a power charge. This is an important skill for the monk, since many of his skills interact with power charges. One of the great things about this skill is that it has a built-in
Bardzo mi się
dash
podobał
forward,
design
which
mobów
makes
w tej
it
grze,
much easier to
naprawdę.
target the skill right at the point where you need
Ktoś się
it.
pytał, co to za 8 przy flaszkach. To są prawdopodobnie skill pointy.
If you're accidentally targeting slightly off the monster, the skill will automatically lock on to the colorable target, and it will even do a small amount of pathfinding around obstacles. We really want to make sure that when you've got an opportunity to use the skill, nothing is going to get in your way.
Trochę dziwny.
Once you have some power charges, you're going to need some skills to power up. A great follow-up is Falling Thunder. Falling Thunder without a power charge just creates a relatively small lightning AoE in front of you. But if you do it with power charges, it turns into a pack clearer with a large number of extra projectiles. One thing to notice here is that, like almost every melee skill in PoE 2, Falling Thunder has a little bit of extra movement built in, just in case you need it. Use the skill within range and you just do the flip in place. But use it at a larger range and your character will move forward while executing it, getting you into position without any time penalty.
Fajne, że
In
inaczej
PoE 2 you
działa.
also get a short period to redirect your target. Notice how you can start the skill facing one way, then whip the mouse sideways to land the skill in a different direction?
Impuls w becie.
Now, in order to get power charges, you're going to first need to get some lower life monsters into a colorable range. You've got a few options if you want to charge right in. Whirling Assault is great. It doesn't do much damage per hit, but it covers a lot of ground. And notice how you can turn as you do it? Generally speaking, you never lose control of your character in PoE 2. If you make a turn at the right time, you can get a couple of extra hits on the monsters, getting them in range of your cull. Follow up with a Killing Palm and then finish off the rest of the pack with your Falling Thunder.
Ja się trochę nie zdziwię, jak oni testowali na Ruflesie system Golda. Bo na Ruflesie mieliśmy Gold.
Chciałem widza stymautować.
Now this is a
Alva!
a vile ruin that hasn't been looted? I wonder why nobody's been in here before.
One useful feature we've added is the ability to call in NPCs to where you are to give you more information or help you with quest objectives, rather than always having to go back to town. In this case, we've called in Alva to find out what to do.
This mechanism. If powered with a small soul core, it could open that door. There should definitely be soul cores somewhere around here. They had to power these constructs somehow.
As Alva just said, we need to find a small soul core to open this door. Let's explore.
Gold równie dobrze może być do jakichś questów.
The more dangerous monsters, a great option is Wind Blast. Wind Blast also doesn't do too much damage, but it keeps
Albo do
enemies
jakiejś,
back.
do
The closer
Irli
they
takiego
are, the
mocnego.
farther they're pushed back. So it's a great option for keeping smaller but higher damage enemies at bay. Note that the bigger the enemy is, the less they'll be pushed back. So trying to push back some giants isn't going to be as effective. And there's the soul core. Let's get back to the door.
Wszystkie płatne rzeczy przeniosą się na PoE 2 i będą dalej dostępne w PoE 1. Hasze, MTX i tak dalej.
Consider me impressed. I'll keep investigating in here. Bring me in if you find anything else.
Now, if you need to defeat tougher enemies, it might be time to break out some of the ice skills in the monk's arsenal. Glacial Cascade creates a wave of ice that moves slowly in front of the player. It's pretty ineffective against fast-moving monsters because most of the damage occurs right at the end of the wave, and so a lot of monsters will just walk right by it. But if you can find a way to make a monster stop at just the right place, it can be very effective.
Nie piszcie, że mało mobów i wolny gameplay, bo nie muszą to pokazać w taki sposób. Więc równie dobrze mogli po prostu ukrócić ilość mobów na trailer, znaczy na gameplay.
But attack 3 times in sequence and you can get off a combo that has a much higher chance to freeze. Get in there with the freeze, then roll back and finish the job with Glacial Cascade. Now, remember how Glacial Cascade is that extra damaging spike at the end? If you hit a frozen enemy with that spike, it shatters the ice on the enemy and does a devastating amount of damage. This is a really great combo against bosses, as you'll see later. Oh yeah, and I've just been casually mentioning rolling around. Did I forget to mention that in PoE 2 we added a dodge roll to every character? Just press spacebar at any time to roll.
Dodge roll na każdej postaci. Jak w Soulsach.
There's no cooldown and no limitations.
Bez cooldownu.
And it even has pathfinding in it, so you don't get stuck on anything. When you dodge roll, you're not invulnerable. If something hits you, you're going to feel it, but most things aren't going to hit you. And that's because while you're rolling, projectiles and melee strikes will always miss. You'll have to roll out of the way of a slam that has AoE, but anyone swinging a sword or throwing a fireball is going to miss. Now, another important function of dodge roll is it lets you cancel out of any skill at any time. This makes it so you don't feel like you're getting stuck during a long animation when something's about to hit you. It really changes how skills with longer attack and cast times play, and makes dodge roll a very reliable feeling way to avoid attacks. So, that's one way to get out of the way of damage, but the monk specializes in mobility, so it would make sense that he would have some more. Wave of Frost is one of our new attacks with a retreat built right in. You move backwards and throw out a cold attack with a significant freeze. A great thing about this is that it puts you at a good distance to follow up with a Glacial Cascade and do a whole pile of damage.
Ktoś widział auto pick-up gema? Jak po nim przebiegł?
Może mu zniknął z...
Może. Aha, dobra, zniknął. Okay.
Z ma wyłączony po prostu.
Nie, oni po prostu Z nie mają wciśniętego, więc to samo im znika.
Another skill you can use to get some extra freeze is Shattering Palm. Shattering Palm is a palm strike that puts a small ice bomb on the target. Kill or deal enough damage to the target and the bomb will explode, doing some damage and a significant freeze. It's a great option against bosses where the wave of ice might not be enough to get that freeze off. But you still really want to use Glacial Cascade to get the damage bonus.
God.
The final skill we're going to show you today is Flicker Strike. It's a monk skill and another skill that consumes power charges.
Tu jest dużo wolniejszy gameplay niż PoE 1, bo jeśli obejrzysz sobie trailery z PoE 1, to też tak wyglądają.
No.
Nie,
Ej, widziałeś Flicker Strike zajebisty? Ej, klik...
It's a great finish of a tough
Ej,
boss
chyba w
fight,
końcu
if you
flickerem
were able to
zagram,
get some
jak będzie tak
power
wyglądał.
beforehand.
Do ludzi, którzy pisali mi, że kopią mi fanboy jestem. Nie, znaczy generalnie do gameplayu samego, to powiedzcie mi, ci normalnie w PoE też bijecie mopki po kolei, czy po prostu bijecie mopki i idziecie dalej? A tu macie praktycznie w jednym miejscu non-stop.
Nie, w sensie ja po prostu mówię, nie? Moje odczucie.
Za wysoko jest.
Here we have Blackjaw, former overseer of the Mechanarium. When the Val fell, he was turned to stone and now guards the area. In order to take down this boss, we're going to need all the tools in the monk's arsenal, especially the combo of Freeze and Glacial Cascade. Now, if you're a PoE 1 player, you might think you can't rely on Freeze because there's so many bosses that are immune to it. But in PoE 2, that's changing significantly. In PoE 1, Freeze is a binary mechanic. An attack freezes the target, or it doesn't. What this basically means is that in PoE 1, we were forced to add freeze immunity to many bosses because freeze just trivialized them. Because of that, freezing was something you could only really rely on while pack clearing, and not something you could use as a core part of your build for boss fighting. In PoE 2, though, all crowd control mechanics now have internal meters that allow you to build up to a freeze or stun, or whatever other CC mechanic that you're using. It's a
Fajne.
little bit
Diablo
like Poise
4.
from games like Elden Ring, though the meters tend to be a lot smaller than those games. When you freeze an enemy, it increases the amount of freeze you need to do to get another freeze, but the increased difficulty bleeds away slowly. More freeze will always let you freeze the boss more often, but this system means that you will not get out of control in party play or interact badly with other CC mechanics, allowing us to let these kinds of mechanics actually work against all bosses.
Roll pewnie działa na zasadzie Lipslama, że też nie masz CDK.
Fajnie, że bossa można nałożyć efekty ograniczenia kontroli.
Powiedział wcześniej?
Nie, to jest flame, ale podobnie brzmi.
Przecież barwowo podobnie.
Ej, ty to serio na żywo grają.
No.
Okej.
Oh, no!
Oj,
All right, let's take two. All right, so this might be a good time to mention that in PoE 2, if you die to the boss, you have to start again from the
Ważne, że
start.
skiny lecą.
There's no boss cheesing.
boss się resetuje po
Słyszeliście? Właśnie.
There might be a...
Boss się resetuje po
You okay?
w skończeniu walki,
One second.
jak wyjdziesz z
One
walki.
technical issues.
Pog!
O, giga na plus zmiana.
Mega na
Having
plus.
some cheats to...
Cheatować będą.
All right, we good? Back to the stream.
Ale się zestresował.
All right, round two. Let's go. Whoever
Znaczy
balanced
szczerze, na
that,
showcase mogli dać jakieś linki czy coś.
No nie no, mogli po prostu puścić skrypt z filmu. No ale...
A teraz jest z innej strony chyba.
No bo wcześniej chyba wchodził z...
Nie no, ale mogli mu jakiś, nie wiem, miecz dać czymś. Już na drugie podejście.
A czekaj, on ma skill pointy, ma nierozdane skill pointy?
To jest wariant.
A może on nie rozdaje tych skill pointów, bo nie chce nikować drzewka na razie.
Może.
Znaczy no,
No wyreżyserowana jest taka postać po prostu.
no.
45 ogląda jak pada.
Widzowie, nie musicie pisać claim na czacie, żeby dostać kopię.
Powaga.
No jakby znowu padł widzowie, to by była zasada lekka.
Oj. Ej, ale szczerze, te ataki ma ciężkie do uniknięcia.
No jak na minibossa aktu,
Bossa, to tak.
w sensie to nawet, jeśli dobrze rozumiem, to jest jakiś taki
Losowa
boss hit lokacji, tak?
Tak, no. Spoko to wygląda.
I oni powiedzieli co, że ma takich bossów być w kampanii ponad 100?
Każda lokacja będzie miała takiego bossa na końcu.
Takiego samego.
Dokładnie tego samego. No ciekawe, czy każdy będzie, podejrzewam, że każdy będzie unikalny, na 100%.
No tak zrozumiałem.
A w 4 masz, nie wiem, 5 botów na krzyż.
Powinni teraz Queen'a dać jak konfakt.
Nie no, widzowie.
Słychać go, nie? Jak on jest zestresowany. To jest słodkie na swój sposób.
Yep, nice.
Czy on powiedział fuck?
Nie wiem.
Chyba tak.
Nie wiemy, kiedy będzie premiera jeszcze,
Ej.
ale się dowiemy dzisiaj.
Ej, szkoda, że nie walczy z krwawym biszopem, nie? Zobaczyłem sobie walkę z krwawym biskupem.
Do Bena zaraz doszłają.
Ej, mega mi się podoba to, że bossy się resetują co walkę.
Tak. On wygląda na cięższego bossa niż Minotaur z pojedyn.
Tak.
Nie wiem, czy cięższego, ale bardziej zaawansowanego, o wiele.
Ej, i tak jak ludzie mówili o logout makro, to będzie jakby... No tu nie chcesz używać logout makro.
To zabija trochę purpose używania logout macro na bossie. Wiadomo, uratujesz się może od śmierci, ale...
To bardzo Dark Soulsowo wygląda, no. Z tymi dodge'ami zwłaszcza.
Właśnie paradoksalnie bardzo dużo zmienia to na hardkorze. Na hardkorze często...
Jezus!
To już jest, jak poniżej 10% HP, to już jest taki...
To jest jak w Soulsach.
Come on, come on. No. Get it. They're so good. There you go, there you go.
After this.
No.
Tak, dostał stuna, nie?
No.
Okej, yeah!
Mamy to.
First try.
All right, second time's the charm. So, Black Draw has dropped a consumable quest item here called the Flame Core. It's a permanent +10 to Spirit. In PoE 2, we really want to make sure that you feel rewarded for exploration. It wouldn't be much good if we made all these awesome optional bosses if we didn't have something great to find for killing them. One of the things you might find for killing a boss is permanent stat bonuses for your character.
Optional w takim razie są te bossy.
Znaczy na pewno
Dosłownie.
nie będą chcieli, żebyś zrobił wszystkie na każdym postaci, więc ciekawe jak to
No tak.
rozwiążą, nie?
Alright, now, because this random area is different, Mark will have to find his way to the exit the hard way.
Because I died? Is it
Yeah,
no
To
longer
takie, że nie
rehearsed?
zauważasz.
No tak. Fasola?
Znowu kotek wchodzi. Lubię te motki kotków.
Szkodzi. Nie wezmę teraz na ręce, bo siedzi daleko. Przepraszam, to
Nie, no raczej by się gra nie wykrzaczyła. To jest na takim etapie, że...
Znaczy wszystko się może wykrzaczyć zawsze, nie? Dlatego myślę, że to jest mega bolty.
Nie! To jest... Ja nienawidzę tego debuffa za Kinemedix. Ten Kers, jak to było? Jak to się nazywało? Ten, co się nakłada
He teases those killing palms more often, Mark.
To jest właśnie...
będzie zapis streama.
Ja mam nadzieję, że jeszcze tego flickera pokażę, bo to wyglądało bardzo dobrze.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
path.
Lightning
Mi się
strike.
podoba. A mi się podoba.
I think you got completely lost there.
I have no idea where I am.
Są czasem dropy Izarek, ale podejrzewam, że jest jakiś loot filter nałożony. Żeby po prostu na ekranie nie leciało
All right.
gówno.
Yeah, there we go. All right, here we are. Here we are. Here's the exit.
I'm gonna die to these sentinels somehow.
Ej, podoba mi się to, co zawsze było problemem PoE, że mob typy się mało różniły od siebie. Tu te mob typy są bardzo wyraziste.
Nie no, szczerze, dobrze, że rozłączyli po 1 i po 2, bo ta gra jest drastycznie inna od po 1. Wielu osobom by się to bardzo nie spodobało.
Spoko,
Ale ja się nastawiam pozytywnie do tego planu.
In order to help with the next area, we're going to call in a sorceress. I'd like to welcome Octavian to the stage, who's going to join the party with Mark.
O kurde, teraz o, we dwójkę. Octavian.
Okej.
Octavian totalny kozak, widzowie. Mega koks ten gość.
Faktycznie, nie ma minimapy.
One second.
Ale możliwe, że ją wyłączyli tylko na potrzeby streama.
Here we go. All right. The sorceress is the new intelligence-focused character in PoE 2.
Tak, ligi
While the
pewnie
witch
będą w innym
focuses more
czasie,
on
to
occult
też jest
magic and
ciekawe.
summoning, the
Zresztą
sorceress
grać
is
w
themed around
PoE2,
pure elemental
jak
destruction.
się znudzi liga, to
Let's
grasz
have a
w
look at how she
PoE1.
plays.
I potem znowu w PoE2.
To mnich i sorceress. Dwie nowe klasy.
This is the largest soul core I've ever seen.
Jakiś boss
With this, we could power the canal systems.
Nie, to jeszcze The Quest.
But it isn't charged. There is still latent energy in this machinarium from its ancient operation.
Ej, ale to jest 200
These
IQ,
lines in the
bo
stonework
ludzie się zdadzą
should lead to
P1, pójdą na
generators.
P2 i mają
You
non-stop
might
Na
need to
zmianę.
find some more
Non-stop
soul cores
core.
to spin
Już nie
them
ma
up.
miejsca na inne.
But
Nie musisz grać w
everything
inne
looks
gry.
to be
Albo w PoE2,
surprisingly
albo w
Dominują
jedynce.
gatunek w
Tak.
ten sposób, to jest
Maybe
basic.
the golems have been maintaining it. In any case, it should still function. We'll have to remove that large core from the wall, of course, but that shouldn't be a problem.
To na starym silniku jest?
We have some skills
Tak, to
here
jest cały
you're
czas
probably
ten sam
gonna
silnik.
recognize if you've played PoE 1
Okay.
before, but
Autorski.
they feel a bit different now. Spark is great in these tight passages since it
Ale
bounces
Spark
around.
zwolnili.
We've added a pierce support gem to really allow it to hit an entire room full of targets.
O nie, ej.
For a more single target
mi się
focused
nie
skill,
podoba.
Arc is a
Tak?
great choice.
Zajebiście wygląda.
Does much more damage
Dla
than the
mnie-
first
A zo
target
Ark,
hit.
zobacz jak skacze zajebiście. Ej, mega to wygląda.
Now, if you find yourself surrounded, it might be a good idea to use Ice Nova. It hits all enemies around you and slows them down with a chill. Just be careful. Getting up close and personal isn't the ideal place for a sorceress to be. She doesn't have the defenses of a more melee-oriented character. In order to help with that, though, we could use Arctic Armor. In PoE 2, Arctic Armor is a buff that builds up as you stand still. You can see the ice crystals forming around the character. They drop off if you walk.
Okej.
When monsters hit you, they take cold damage and build up to a freeze, so it's a great defense. Just be careful. You have to be standing still for a little while to get the full effect, so trying to stutter step using it isn't the best strategy. Now, Arctic Armor is an ongoing buff, but did you notice it didn't reserve any mana? How does that work? Well, we were pretty sick of the fact that in PoE 1, basically every character was playing with no mana pool, so we decided to change the way that reservation works. In PoE 2, there's a new resource called Spirit. Spirit is a dedicated resource that you can use for
Oh
ongoing
my
effects like
God.
Arctic Armor, heralds, auras, and minions.
Ej,
Fajne.
i miniony też będzie rezerwować,
Everyone
powiedział.
starts
Okay.
with 100 spirit, which is
O
enough for
kurwa.
most ongoing effects. But if
Dymy.
you want more, you're going to need to get some more spirit, which is available on mods from items and on the passive tree. But if you're willing to give up your offhand slot, the easiest way to get it is by holding a scepter. Find out more about that in the items talk later on.
Okej.
Now, if you want to increase the cold damage that you're dealing, you can always use Frost Bomb. It places a bomb on the ground that reduces enemies' cold resistance while it's ticking down. It's a great opportunity to use some cold skills before it explodes.
Ej, fajną animację wybuchu ma teraz rozwą.
And speaking of cold skills, a great skill to use on monsters with lower cold resistance is Comet. This is a new skill in PoE 2 and it hits pretty damn hard. It costs a lot of mana and has a really long cast time, but it's worth the wait. It does a devastating amount of
Vertex
damage.
Spirit
To help you out of danger,
nie służy do
your
kastowania
character moves
speli,
back slightly
tylko
as
do
it casts.
rezerwacji aur. Jeśli nie grałeś w
It's
PoE,
pretty
to
hard
nie
to hit
rozumiesz.
opponents, but it's great on tougher enemies that stand still, or even a larger pack if you're further away and can predict where they're going to move. Now, if you run out of mana casting too many of those, I guess in an emergency you could use your free-to-cast Fireball. So where did that come from, you ask? Well, This is a great opportunity to explain the way that we have changed caster weapons in PoE 2. Now, in PoE 1, caster weapons had a default melee attack that nobody used. And because they had that, they also had a bunch of attack mods that would spawn in them that were useless to a caster. In PoE 2, we wanted to clean that up. So each staff now comes with a built-in free-to-cast
Let's
spell.
go!
Fajne.
Just put it on and spam away to your heart's content. Now, this particular staff is the base type that you'll get right on the starting beach. So it's quite likely that you'll have outgrown it by now. So that's why we've also made a lot of staves with more utility-focused powers for casters to use. Here we have a crystal staff. It has a pretty cool built-in spell called Unleash. Using it slams your staff on the ground and will allow you to triple cast whatever you cast with your next spell.
Okej, Unleash jest
Now, of
trochę
course, what you're
klasem.
probably going to want to use with that is something powerful, and Comet is a great option.
Ale węgerek.
Ale fajne, Unleash akurat podoba mi się.
No
You'll
way,
notice that
bro.
Unleash is one of the few skills in PoE 2 with a cooldown. In general, we really try to avoid using cooldowns because we really hate the feeling that combat is just waiting to cast your next spell. But it does make sense for Unleash since it's free to cast, and it's something we want you to use situationally anyway.
Fajne.
Now, if you're facing something tough, you might need to try out Mana Tempest.
Mana Tempest.
Mana Tempest creates a circle of power which your character literally hovers over the ground. While in the circle, your mana drains, but it powers up all your spells.
Latanko na tym.
Projectiles will fork, beams will chain further, and you also do a lot more damage.
Będzie Navy.
No mana.
Nie ma man.
Ten gameplay Sorki jest ciekawszy. Lepiej mi się go ogląda.
No, oni...
A ja bym chciał zobaczyć druida, kurde.
No.
Tego niedźwiedzia,
With all
no.
of these skills, here's a great combo to try. First, cast Frost Bomb to reduce the target's cold resistance. Then use Mana Tempest to increase your damage. Follow up with Unleash, and then triple cast Comet to do a truly insane amount of damage.
Ale węgerek. Ej, szczerze, zajebiście to wygląda.
Where those ghosts come from?
These ghosts.
Oh, annoying.
This
Whose
rare
fault is that?
This rare monster has dropped an uncut gem, and that's a great opportunity to talk about how skill gems drop in PoE 2. Instead of dropping specific gems, you can find uncut gems. Just right-click on them and pick whatever skill you want.
Co?
Whoops. The gem will
Custom
come
shock.
pre-leveled to the level of the
Widzicie?
area that's dropped it. So it's a lot easier to change between skills in PoE 2.
Barrier invocation.
This time, I think it might be cool to grab one of our meta gems. Meta gems are skills that can have other skills socketed into them, changing how they work. In this case, we're going to select Cast on Shock.
Go.
Custom Shock,
let's
widzowie.
equip this thing on the skill screen and choose which spell to trigger with it. I
Jak
think
to
Comet
ładnie
might be
wyglądają teraz te gemy.
Lepiej dużo co robili.
Now,
Kometa
this cast
będzie
on
się
shock
aktywować w
reserves
szoku.
Spirit, we'll need to first disable our Arctic armor. We have to decide if we'd rather have the extra defense or the extra offense of the cast on shock using our spark.
Wait,
In
to jest...
PoE 2, trigger gems use
To
a
jest
system of filling
rezerwuje.
up
To jest
cast
jak
time on each trigger.
Spellslinger.
Basically, if a skill has a short cast time, it will trigger really often. And if it has a long cast time, like this comet here, it will take a lot longer to trigger. You
Okej.
can see on the top left corner, there's a counter that shows you how long until the next trigger.
Okej. Spoko.
Fajne.
Fajne,
Dobrze rozkminione.
żeby
Please
Zobacz,
shots
no.
the monsters.
Taka mała... O.
There we go. And there you have it. That's using cast on shock. We've automatically cast comet whenever we're using our lightning skills.
Darmowa gra, widzowie.
Darmowa gra.
So, we found the generator. Time to power it up.
Ej, to jest jak ta z hideoutu, z Support Packa. Reuse Asset, to co wiruje pety.
Faktycznie, no.
As power is restored to the mechanarium, all the constructs are coming back to life. We'll need to fight them on the way back to the charged soul core. So, one thing that PoE 1 players might have noticed is this character has both lightning spells and cold spells. That's pretty inefficient, right? It's a big no-no for most builds because any specialization into cold or lightning isn't going to affect the other element. And generic elemental damage increases are not going to be as powerful as focusing on a single element. Well, in PoE 2 we have another major new system to introduce to solve these kinds of problems. And it starts, oddly enough, with weapon swap. Now, in PoE 1, weapon swap isn't really used much for its originally intended purpose. We imagine that people are going to be swapping in and out between different weapons to deal with whatever situation they were in. People just don't do that at all. And a large reason for that is because it's really, really awkward. In PoE 2, we wanted to solve all of that. The staff Octavian is using here has an ice mod on it that makes it great for when he's using his ice spells. But we would also like to be able to make sure that this build works just as well for his lightning spells. If Octavian equips his previous staff in his second weapon set, you can see that it appears on the character's back. Now, we're going to open up the skill screen. If Octavian opens the skill options for his lightning skills, you can see here that you can choose which weapon sets are usable with each skill. First, we uncheck set 1 from being used by his lightning skills. Then we go through the cold skills and turn those off with his lightning weapon. We'll just take a second.
If I can remember where they all are.
Yeah. Now, when we use Spark, the character will automatically switch to the lightning staff on his back and then use the skill. And when Octavian uses his Ice Nova, his character automatically switches to his Ice Staff before using it.
To było zlinkowane chyba, co?
Ja nie widziałem.
Ja o tym słyszałem, ale nie wiem jak powiem. Na Discordzie zapisz tutaj.
You can configure each skill for which set to use, or both if you don't mind which. There's a very short time penalty to switching, so it can be good to leave some skills on both sets if it doesn't matter which weapon set you're using. But we still have a problem, passives. Wouldn't it be nice if we could specialize in both cold and lightning passives on the character? Well, in PoE 2 you can.
What?
Hopefully Mark can deal with those monsters while we do this demo. So, we're on the passive skill screen here, and you can see that we are close to both a cold and a lightning cluster. At the top right of the screen, you can see that we have some weapon set specific points to allocate. If Octavian holds shift, he can allocate set 1 to the cold passives.
No way, bracie.
And then allocate set 2 to the lightning passives.
That's big, dude. Zajebiste.
2 buildy na każdą
Check
postać.
it out. As we use our weapon swap, the skills allocate changes from one build to the other automatically. So whenever we cast the appropriate spell, the character's passives reconfigure on the fly to the correct build for that spell.
Wow.
Ale banger.
Now you can't do this with every single passive on your tree. Only points granted from skill books will allow this kind of dual specialization. So you're not going to be changing from a mace slamming warrior into a fire elementalist with the press of a button. But it certainly increases the number of options you have for builds. There's a huge number of places where the system can shine. You could augment your dagger shadow build with traps, or have a great curse set up on your witch with one spec and then move to your chaos debuff spells with the other, for example. It really opens up your options. Now another fun metagem to try out is called Barrier Invocation. This works a little bit like the trigger gems I talked about before, but this one charges up as your energy shield is hit by monsters. We're going to put an Ice Nova in this one. The more energy shield you lose, the more charge builds up.
Będą musieli jeszcze utrzymywać PoE1 i PoE2 na pobie.
So yeah, the more energy shield you lose, the more charge will build up, until the point you're able to cast the socketed skill instantly.
Cast one damage taken, basically. Tylko na...
Here we go.
Yes-a.
So you lose some, so you lose some energy shield, and at just the right time, invoke Ice Nova to cast all the stacked up copies in one instant cast. If you keep losing shield, you'll build up even more charge for even more casts. So it's a great defensive option in an emergency.
1-6 kawiców.
O Boże święty.
Cały czas masz takie coś w stylu, nie no, już chyba pokazali wszystko, nie?
A jeszcze 8 godzin.
Nie wszystko, jeszcze nie oddali mi drzewka. To mnie ciekawi.
No.
Overkill.
And here we are back at the charged soul core. All we have to do now is take it.
Golda nie wytłumaczyli, to prawda.
No pewnie wytłumaczą.
Just take it.
Zikoatl. O, zajebisty.
Fajne.
Don't die this time, guys.
O kurwa.
O kur...
Ej, co jak znowu się wyjawił?
Ej, wszystkie map bossy teraz takie będą. Co mapkę się będzie miało
O!
fight potem.
Frozen though.
Frozen, nice.
Helps that we're both doing ice damage. Cold damage.
Ale jaki ta sorka ma DPS?
No.
Tego molka.
Ty, ale tak, jak on knockbackuje tego bossa.
Zachodzi bossa od tyłu, żeby unikać jego ataku. Coś co w PoE 1 się nie zdarza raczej.
Frozen?
O! Ej, fajnie to wygląda.
No.
Ale niektórymi atakami, jak patrzę, to aż
Getting
mam
real
ochotę,
lucky with
żeby
those freeze
dostać
procs
tego
this
bossa.
time.
O, dostał szoka.
Nice. Frozen.
PoE 2 na początku nie będzie po prostu.
Get away.
Chyba, że zaskoczą.
Chyba, że... ale to tak się nie myśli. Jeśli chodzi o timeline.
To ty mógłby dostać, po prostu ciekawe.
O!
To jest...
O!
Get away from him. Get away. Get away. Triangle.
Ale zaczął nakurwiać na low HP.
Jeszcze nie wiadomo kiedy wyjdzie, ale dowiemy się w przeciągu pewnie godziny.
Ej, dobra, to ja nie chcę wiedzieć, znaczy chcę wiedzieć, ale jak będą wyglądać endgame'owe bossy, jak spawnowani bossy tak wyglądają.
So that's Path of Exile 2. These areas, as well as around